Oh, I love the applause just for walking into a room. That's nice. I'm Christa Wessel from All Classical FM, and to my right is somebody you probably recognize, Mr. Carlos Kalmar.
Good evening, everybody.
I'm kind of curious, just off the bat, how many folks will have seen all 3 concerts at the end of tonight? That's amazing. And 3 lectures. Fantastic. Now, Carlos,
after this lecture, there are the final exams.
How tiring is this?
Oh, this is not, come on. There is nothing tiring in this. Nothing.
To be presenting 3 different programs in 3 different consecutive nights?
Fine. As long as you always tell me which one is when.
Tonight is Concerto 3 and 5.
And by the way, I mean, in terms of tiring, I mean, this is, of course, an intense time, and it's wonderful to have Arnaldo with us and to play all the 3 Leonores. But the orchestra and I today were met in the morning and rehearsed Mahler 1, speaking about, we're working.
You're working hard.
Yeah, and tomorrow is not a day off, another rehearsal.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
And I remember I met with Arnaldo earlier in the week and sat down and had a chat with this lovely man, and he was the opposite of what I expected. I thought with this huge, gargantuan, Herculean task in front of him, he would be uptight and nervous and tired. He was at peace. He loves being at the piano. He loves practicing. He loves you.
He loves practicing.
He said some really lovely things about you.
Well, we get along very well, but the fact that he loves practicing, there must be something wrong with this guy. Yeah, with Arnaldo it's always fun. It's always a very good rapport, and you signaled with your hands, but yesterday it just happened that we did a really nice reading together of the 4th piano concerto, and then we did an encore, and we just repeated the 2nd movement of the 4th piano concerto. And the fun part was that we did things completely differently. We were not backstage, and he wasn't telling me, in bar 32, I'm going to mess up completely and do something different. No. We just went, and just in the moment, it's always this wonderful idea of give and take. And things happen on the stage that you have not rehearsed exactly as they come. And it's just a different, slightly different approach.
And he mentioned to me that one of the reasons he feels so safe in committing to this big task is because he knows you've got his back. He knows that when you both breathe in, you're both going to be right there together. You have this South American background. You both have a school in Vienna.
As far as I know, I didn't study his biography, to tell you the truth. I think he's a real Brazilian. I am a South American by birth, but I cannot say that there is South American blood in my veins. There is nothing. There is blood in my veins.
Well, in terms of the 2 concertos you'll be playing tonight, Mr. Cohen told me that these are 2 of his favorites. The 3rd of the Beethoven piano concertos, when he performed that for the Busoni competition, this was the concerto that he felt like clinched it for him. He won the Busoni competition with the 3rd, so it's a very tender work for him.
Well, the 3rd piano concerto is actually, it's kind of the last piano concerto of Beethoven, where Beethoven, it's kind of going back and forth between being very innovative and being kind of a traditionalist in a way. And I believe that Beethoven's piano concerto number 3, the C minor concerto, actually has a brother or a cousin written by Mozart. There is a C minor concerto written by Mozart, and actually once upon a time Beethoven and some friends listened to that piano concerto performed, and Beethoven kind of was in awe and said, how on earth is anybody going to ever write a piece like Beethoven C minor piano concerto, 491 it is the number. And actually, having conducted both, I think that that Beethoven is right. There is it's hard to tell the difference, but the piano concerto by Mozart in itself is, I think, probably one of the best piano concertos that Mozart wrote. Now, Mozart wrote a couple of piano concertos, a larger number than Beethoven for sure, and some of them are undoubtedly amongst the best ever written for any pianist there is. They are so well constructed, they are virtuosic, they are meaningful. C minor concerto, in a way, at least for me, always stood out because maybe it's the tonality, I don't really know why, but it is so unbelievably perfect. And then Beethoven comes and, of course, on purpose, writes a C minor concerto himself. And in a way, he goes a route that has been traveled already, meaning structurally, the first movement is pretty much the standard that you expect from a piano concerto in those days. There is nothing really new, aside from maybe it's a little longer, maybe there is a little more dramatism to it, stuff like that. But in a way, it is what everybody expected going to a piano concerto. Pianist sits, orchestra displays all the material, and then the pianist enters, takes it from there. There is one little piece of new information for the audience that is a little bit unusual, but I would say in the array of these many compositions, it gets a little bit lost, which is the best example, I would say, is probably the Concerto number 2, which we played 2 days ago, which is at the end of the first movement, every piano concerto by Beethoven has a cadenza, which is the orchestra sets it up, the pianist takes off completely, different length. In the second piano concerto, and that is kind of the tradition at that time, the pianist finishes the cadenza and doesn't say a word for the remainder of the movement. And that is what happens in piano concerto number 2. Now, the unusual thing may happen that here and there is in a Beethoven concerto, number 4, for example, that the pianist continues to play a little bit, but it's not such a great deal that is being done. Now, in piano concerto number 3, the unusual thing is how do you introduce what happens after the cadence? That is very unusual, because there are 2 ways to do that. Either you thrill forever, and the orchestra comes in in a light mood, always in the right tonality, never with a dissonance. Or you just play fast things and the orchestra like boom, and then within a minute the movement is over. In this piano concerto, it's kind of a compilation of, actually it's not even a compilation of both versions, because there is not really a trill at the end of the cadence, and the orchestra starts very, very, very softly, but with a dissonance, which is like, what's going on? Something wrong here? And from there he takes it to the end and mounts in dramatism and gets louder and louder, and the pianist always still takes the lead, and that is something absolutely new.
You know, as I listen to this third piano concerto and kind of hear Beethoven getting his own voice, in a sense, what I'm imagining is a very Mozartian Beethoven at the beginning with maybe the powdered wig and a little pigtail. And then by the end of the concerto, he's got that crazy mane of natural hair. That's what I sense from note 1 to the final note, some kind of transformation happening there.
That is actually very accurate. And just one other parallel that, okay, you might think, come on, that's so constructed, it's not even there. the first two notes in Beethoven's, this piano concerto you're going to hear tonight, and the first two notes in the Mozart C minor are exactly the same notes played by the same instruments. And where Beethoven, tam, pam, pa, di, din, 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 Mozart, ta, ri, ti, little different. But it's kind of same instruments, same interval, both start softly. Display the theme, then they get loud. But it's fascinating.
Do you sense Arnaldo Cohen's preference for this concerto over the other ones?
No. No. When you play all the 5 concertos plus the triple together, what you sense is the development of the composer and the development of the pianist in the way he approaches the piece. But I would dare to say that the way the pianist approaches the piece can be, again, demonstrated the best way if you put together Piano Concerto number 2 and the last piano concerto you're going to hear in this series, the number 5. It's just the touch has to be different. Because number 2 is very light all the time, and it's like playing with notes, and it has some fun. It has one little episode that sounds like the crazy Beethoven. That's pretty much it. And the rest is very Haydnesque and Mozartian. And number 5, you cannot find Mr. Mozart there. There is nothing there.
Yeah, the way this one begins, the way number 5 begins, orchestral chord, and then it's like, go piano, you know.
Piano, go. Yeah, that is fascinating. But let's stick maybe with number 3 for a second, because I always like to know how people, or I wish I could know, how people reacted when they heard the piece at the time this was premiered. Matter of fact, this piece, the number 3, if I recall this, was premiered at the same time and in the same concert when it was a concert where Piano Concerto number 3 was premiered, Symphony number 2 was played, the oratorio Christ on the Mount of Olives was being played, and I think his Symphony number 1 was also there. Now, the thing is, you learn from these 2 things that are just, one is a simple fact of life, which is concerts back then. We are talking 1800, around that time, were considerably longer than now. And I can't wait to present to a really interested audience who comes in substantial numbers, a concert of only one composer who is alive and playing on the stage. I don't think that would ever happen nowadays. Nowadays what we need is always a mix. And still in those days they heard all this music, was all Beethoven, and some of it was completely new. And talking about that, I don't know for a fact that there were people in the audience who actually could feel the meaning of harmony, meaning what harmony, the effect of harmony in a piece, and what C minor has to do with G major and all this very technical stuff that is not interesting. But the second movement of the Piano Concerto number 3 is a little bit crazy. Meaning the tonality in which it is written. Because you are actually not really allowed to do that, but Beethoven, well, it's Beethoven. He does it. So he goes pretty far away from C minor and goes into E major, which sheds a light of tranquility into this. Also, not entirely unusual, but the way it's done, it's, I think, quite innovative, is yesterday. Was it yesterday? Yeah, right, yesterday. Yesterday we played Piano Concerto number 1. Second movement, slow movement. Orchestra and pianist played together the first theme, at least the first 3 bars. We play together, then the pianist takes off and displays the material. Usually maybe the orchestra displays a little bit, pianist comes in. Here, the pianist starts the movement, plays for a minute, and then the orchestra takes over. That is quite astounding. And the next thing that is so incredibly typical of Beethoven, it's not new in his third piano concerto, but it's so brilliantly done, is that in middle section he tends to give the piano a secondary role and the orchestra takes over, meaning the pianist plays broken chords or stuff like that, and the music is in mostly the winds, like you're going to hear. It's wonderful. And the last thing that is very interesting about the third piano concerto is 2 things. First of all, the start of the last movement. For this I only say for whoever in the audience kind of plays piano, and how do you say this in English? Okay, let me just say it for the sake of it. It's a technical thing. The note A flat and the note G sharp are the same note, right? I don't know how you call that. Never mind. I can tell you how it's called in German, but not so important. It's the same note, meaning it's the same black key on the keyboard. Second movement, Piano Concerto number 3, ends with the chord and the lead note is this black key. Last movement starts just a step below on the G and then goes immediately to A flat. That's a strike of genius. How to start a movement, how to make a relationship to something that already happened. And then, well, then a classic rondo takes off. We're all going to have fun.
What was the second thing you were going to say?
And the second thing is at the end of the rondo, the third movement, he changes the meter, he changes the pace, and he goes into the major key. It's not so unusual, but the way he does it, it's very Beethoven. Genius, this man.
So now we've got Beethoven with the crazy, the powdered wig is gone, and he's a crazed, almost misanthropic guy by this point. I mean, he's a gruff, he doesn't really like spending time with people. Yeah,
exactly.
But one thing that I find so fascinating about Beethoven is that, yeah, he wasn't a pleasure to be around, but there was always this glimmer of hope and this ray of sunshine that you were speaking of. You can always hear that, even amidst the most tragic sounding music that he wrote, there's always this glimmer of hope. And I definitely hear that in number 5, for sure.
Well, number 5, called The Emperor, wrong title. To say it in a simple word, Beethoven didn't know the title and probably wouldn't have approved at all. Because actually the Emperor, some say that it was first, the title Emperor is attributed to a French officer who, hearing this piece, exclaimed, "L'Empereur," referring to Napoleon. Beethoven really did not care that much for Napoleon, no. But you cannot deny the fact that we are here with a majestic piece of music. Here, Beethoven is, as you say, powdered wig is long gone, and if you compare number 4, which you just heard not even 24 hours ago, and number 5, there is one thing similar, which is the beginning is non-standard. Actually, you cannot do that, technically. Specifically, you cannot start a concerto like number 5 forbidden for composers, but, well, Beethoven does it. So he starts with a single chord, the pianist takes off completely, and we sit there on the stage like waiting to come until Arnaldo comes down, and then we play another chord, and again, and a third chord, and the first 1.5 minutes belong to the piano. The orchestra has nothing to say, which is the idea of putting the cadence of a concerto, instead of at the end, to put it in the beginning.
The cadenza.
The cadenza. Thing. Cadence is something different. Actually, there is even one composer that we all love very much and whose piano concerto we all know very, very well, who did that too, which was Tchaikovsky in his first piano concerto. You remember this? Ti-ta-ta-ta, and then the pianist plays and plays and plays, and after a minute, the pianist goes completely on his own, and we in the orchestra, we stand there and wait until it's over. Beethoven does that, then we display pretty much the classic themes and so on. Everything is so far so good until the moment where the real cadenza should happen is there. It's clearly there, and you think, okay, the orchestra is going to shut up completely. They are going to wait for the next 5 minutes to be over. The pianist is going to go completely crazy. No, it's maybe 45 seconds, that's all. It's over very quickly, and that is very, very unusual. The next thing that happens, which is funny, it's this second movement. I don't know whether anybody of you has a favorite moment, and I'm always very reluctant to say what is my favorite. Don't ever ask me what is my favorite music. I always have my standard answer, which is, please ask me things that I actually do not like, because favorite does not exist. Second movements in Beethoven piano concertos are all masterworks, and it's very difficult to tell, okay, which is it? You have to pick one, and I think number 5. Okay.
Well, I think Leonard Bernstein liked it a lot too.
He liked it, right?
Do you know the second movement to this concerto? It comes
in the second part.
In the second, there's a place for us.
Exactly.
Yeah. From West Side Story.
The art of being a composer, a good composer, is the art of knowing where to steal from. The astounding thing in the Emperor Piano Concerto in regards to how the second movement works is you have this very majestic, in a way very, I would maybe even march-like first movement, very powerful, and then the second movement has nothing powerful, ever. Just doesn't happen. It's very tender, and I also think that the problem is, again, that the most difficult music you can find, or maybe the most challenging, if you don't care so much for technical stuff, if you only care for the meaning and the depth of what music actually is about, the most difficult music probably is the simplest. Because being simple does not allow us musicians to be expressive in a way that is, let's say, over the top. I can talk to you, if you all come, I hope you all come, to next weekend's program about Mahler's First Symphony, which we are going to play this weekend, where in the third movement it starts very simple, then it gets overly expressive, and in a way the overly expressive is easy. Yeah. Now in Beethoven's this piano concerto there is nothing overly expressive.
It's like, understated.
It's understated, and it's like touching a crystal vase, and please touch it gently. Don't do anything to it.
And even the way that last movement then is this giant finale, but even the way he gets into it's a little tentative. Da-da-da, da-da-da.
Exactly. Yesterday we were joking about the ending of the second movement and the fact that if the audience would ask for more and we would say, okay, let's play the movement again, how are you going to do that? Because the second movement of the fifth piano concerto goes into the third, and you cannot stop.
It doesn't have a cadence.
Exactly. It doesn't have a cadence. So what are you going to do? And it's, again, the fascinating thing of that is the simplicity of the idea. How to get from movement 2 to movement 3. It's mind-boggling how simple it is, but trust me, nobody could have invented that if it wouldn't have been for this master. And then we go on our rondo. Okay, the last movement is just, as I call it, is a lot of fun with a lot of wrong accents, which is very Beethoven-esque, at least in his piano concertos. It's always on the wrong side of the bar, the accent. Sorry. That's very Beethoven. It's like, once I heard a lecture by somebody, you may remember him, Robert Levin. He played a Mozart concerto with us. Oh, wonderful guy. He's professor at Harvard and knows pretty much everything about music there is to be known. And I heard a lecture where he just proved why Mozart is a genius. And he kind of played a Mozart sonata and distorted it in the way other composers who are not as good as Mozart would have done it. And all of a sudden you realize, oh, this little turn, this little way of expressing yourself. And then we are talking about the third movement of Beethoven's Piano No. 5. If that accent, what I call the wrong accent, wouldn't be there, you probably wouldn't even care so much for the movement. It still would be good music, but it wouldn't be like, wow.
I've heard so much enthusiasm about this Beethoven Fest. I mean, have you all enjoyed 3 nights of Beethoven? Yeah. Let's do this again with another composer in this future season. I think that's a great idea, to indulge ourselves for a whole weekend.
Yeah, there are not so many composers with whom we can do that. Actually,
I vote for Mahler.
Yeah, Mahler piano concertos are fantastic. Mahler, it doesn't work. The only composer, I mean, you can, if you want, you can do a Brahms weekend, playing the 2 piano concertos and some of the... No.
Okay, well, we'll talk.
No.
You got to go get dressed.
Yeah. By the way, because many of you have been here, Leonora Overture, because we start this concert with a large overture. Leonora 2 is long.
It's the biggest of the 3, isn't it? Or 4?
No, 3 is longer, by maybe 20 seconds. So if we all have in mind and remember well this Leonora 3 with this ta-da-da-dee-da-da-dun-dun-dun-dun, you're going to hear it again. And the fascination for all of you who know Leonora 3 well is, it is pretty much the same as Leonora 3, just a little bit different, but there is everything you know about Leonora 3 is there. Starts with an adagio, quotes the aria from the opera Fidelio for the main male character. Yes, it does it. And then the fast part starts with the same theme that I just sang. And yes, there is the famous trumpet call, which we all know so well. It's just a different tonality and it's a different rhythm, but it's all there. And when you hear them side to side, or you play them with just a day in between, you realize how much of a genius this guy, Mr. Beethoven, is. Because actually, the overture you are going to hear tonight is phenomenal music. And then he wrote another one, the No. 3, which is just not only phenomenal, it's like a little more icing on the cake.
Carlos, thank you. Your enthusiasm for this music is evident, and I appreciate you taking time today.
Christa, thank you.